We are going to finish up this series today. We're going to finish up the series we've been on called The Real You. And this is a series all about the soul. We tried to define what it was and look at why it's important. We've tried to look at why a healthy soul is important. And then the last couple weeks and today we're looking at how we can have a healthy soul. What ingredients are necessary for a healthy soul? And these 3 weeks, this is not an exhaustive list, but it's 3 of the top things I think that our soul needs. So 2 weeks ago, we looked at the issue that our soul needs a center. We can't base it on a lot of peripheral things because those things fade, those things change, they're not very solid. And so our foundation of our life, the foundation of a healthy soul, must be centered on Christ. And then last Sunday, we looked at the idea that our soul needs to be in a rhythm so our soul can find rest. We too often live go, go, go nonstop, and we wonder why we're always stressed out and worn out. And if we can learn to live in this rhythm that leads to rest, our soul can find that rest. Today, we're going to look at the final thing in this series that our soul needs, and that is our soul, or the soul, your soul needs blessing. Hence my shirt, #blessed. So your soul needs blessing, and that seems like kind of a strange thing. So I want to define this term and how we're going to use it. And I did this a couple years ago. About 2 years ago, we did a series through the Beatitudes, where these teachings of Jesus, everyone starts out with blessed are the blank. And so we looked at this definition of what it means to be blessed, and I want to revisit that today as we start this discussion, as we look at what does it mean that the soul needs blessing? What does that mean? So there's 2 Hebrew words in the scripture and 2 Greek words in the scripture that really define this word bless or blessed, that give us sort of this proper view of what we're looking for, what the end goal is, what it means to be blessed or to be a blessing. The 2 Hebrew words, the first one is asher. And the definition in Hebrew is it means happy or prosperous. And if you read Psalm 1, that's how the very first psalm begins, is with this Hebrew word asher. Blessed, it says, is the man that does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful, but he meditates on God's law day and night. So that kind of person is blessed. They are happy and prosperous. The second Hebrew word that describes blessing is one we might be more familiar with, and that is shalom, which is a traditional Jewish greeting. And it simply means peace or wholeness. And so like we would say, hi, how are you? We meet someone on the street. But if you're in Israel, you're probably going to hear the word shalom as the greeting. And it's not so much just a greeting of how things are going, but it's a blessing of how we want things to go for you. It's kind of an interesting concept that this greeting is a blessing. I want peace and wholeness in your life. That's how I'm going to greet you when I see you. So those 2 words in the Hebrew define this word blessed. 2 words in the Greek that define this word bless are makarios, which also means happy, like the first word in Hebrew, and then teleos, which means perfect or whole. Now, when you look at the definitions of these words, you see 2 words in common in both languages, which gives us a pretty round 360-degree view of what being blessed is. So, being blessed, or the word blessed, would then mean happiness and wholeness. So someone who is blessed is happy and whole. Someone who pronounces blessing is pronouncing happiness and wholeness. There is one issue, or a couple of issues with this definition, and that is happiness and wholeness are both subjective and temporary. Because look at it in terms of sports. It's subjective because in sports there are 2 teams that are playing, or if it's a tournament, several teams. Well, at the end of that tournament, or at the end of that match or that game, only one team feels happy and whole. Right? The winner, the victor, the champion. The other team or teams do not feel happy and whole. They're kicking themselves for mistakes that they made. They feel like there's room for improvement. They're so far superior to how we played, and so we have a lot of work to do. They don't feel that way. It's the same in business. When you have business A that is succeeding and their stock price goes up and their company is hiring more people because they have so much more production, they're happy and whole. But that would probably mean, by default, that companies B and C are not happy and whole because they're not as prosperous. They have some catching up to do. They're not as popular. They're not as well known. They're not as profitable. And so this is subjective. It's also temporary because happiness, how many of you know it can come and go in your life? Situation changes, your happiness level will change accordingly. It's just a fact of life. It's who we are. It's how we're made. And so if that's all that this word means, then it may not be much of a blessing. And if you're pronouncing a blessing on someone of happiness and wholeness and their situation never improves, well, then that's not great either. Or if being blessed is all about my happiness and my wholeness, that falls short of a great definition as well. So really what we see at the very essence of this word in the Greek and the Hebrew in Scripture and the full idea of what it means to be blessed or that your soul needs blessing is not just happiness and wholeness, but also it's me living in a way that promotes mutual human flourishing. So I don't just want my happiness and wholeness to matter to me. True blessing is that others' happiness and wholeness also matters to me, and that I live in a way that promotes that. That's what the Beatitudes are all about. As we looked at that a couple years ago. The whole point of being blessed is that I am blessed to be a blessing. And so what Jesus says is, blessed are the peacemakers, for they'll be children of God. So I'm making peace, I'm blessing others, and in return I receive the blessing. Our soul needs this in our lives. Our soul desperately needs blessing in our lives. And blessing, this idea runs deep into the core of who we are. That's why we're talking about in this series on the soul, because blessing exists on what I call the soul level. Blessing runs deep, and that's why we even sang this song this morning. Psalm 103 verse 1 says, "Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me, bless his holy name." That is the essence of true worship. Is that as we look at, again, the definition of blessing is happiness, wholeness, and flourishing. Worship, then, is that saying back to God, God, you are my happiness. In you, I find wholeness. In you, I truly flourish. That's what that time of worship is all about. But it's not simply about that 15, 20, 25-minute set once a week. Worship is not restricted to that. Expressing that blessing to God is deeper than that. It's a soul level. It's not just a check mark on the box that we sing a few songs on Sunday, and so I feel like it was a regular Sunday. But it's bigger than that. And that's what Paul gets at in Romans 12, verse 1. He says, "Therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship." So, true blessing on a soul level is daily, consistent commitment to God. That's what it means to live a life of blessing, and our soul needs to experience that regularly, consistently, not just for 20 minutes one day a week at 10 o'clock on Sunday. That's not sufficient for your soul. This idea of blessing runs deeper than that. And we know the blessing runs deep because there's a story in the Old Testament of a couple of brothers. They're twins. They're named Jacob and Esau. You probably heard of them before. There's this ancient Hebrew idea called the birthright. And it's basically this. The firstborn son of the family is given a double portion of the estate by their father just because they were the first son that was born. Yay, you. You get all this just because you came out first and you were a boy. So the point is there's two brothers, and so Esau is the older of these twins, just by a hair. These guys are so competitive. It says they wrestled in the womb. So their mom's like, "Oh my gosh, get out. Can you just get out already, okay?" Speaking of babies, did want to mention that the Manleys finally had their little baby girl. I don't know if you saw that on Facebook this last weekend. Yesterday afternoon, what is it, like 1:30, something like that. So Evangeline Manley came into the world yesterday. We're so excited for them, which is why we were up here doing, this nonsense up here this morning. So we're thankful for them and their family, and they're all doing well, and so we're just thankful for them. So these two brothers are fighting in the womb. Even when they come out of the womb, it says that Jacob the younger wanted to get out. He was so competitive, he held on to the heel of his brother Esau. Like he's like, if I'm going to be second, it's going to be by a hair, brother. And that's how they are their entire life. They compete, and here's the big problem. The parents played favorites, which didn't help at all. Because the dad, Isaac, the older Esau, he's the manly man, so he's my favorite. He's my boy. And the younger one, Jacob, he's kind of the homemaker, so he's mommy's boy, okay? And so they had this feud going on forever. So this birthright comes into play because Esau, as the older, is going to get this double portion. He's going to get 2/3 of the father's estate when their father dies. So it says one day Jacob is making this stew at home, and Esau comes back from hunting all day, and he's famished. And he says, "Man, I'm hungry. That smells good. Give me some of that." And his brother says, "Well, it's going to cost you, bro." And Esau's like, "I'll give anything. I'm so hungry." And so Jacob says, give me your birthright. He says, hey, is this bowl of stew worth 33% of the father's estate? And Esau said, yes. Gives him 33 1/3% more of the estate. Gives him his extra share for a little bit of lunch. And the scripture says that Esau despised his birthright. But that's the end of that story. But there's a second part of this thing that comes down. It's not just the birthright, but there's a blessing also that the father gives to the firstborn, basically on his deathbed. So we skip forward to Genesis 27, and we see here Isaac, the father of these twins, is about to die. He brings in Esau, his oldest son, in verse 4, Genesis 27, verse 4, it says this, prepare my favorite dish and bring it here for me to eat. Then I will pronounce the blessing that belongs to you, my firstborn son, before I die. Now we see, though, you don't see it in this translation. There's only one I could find that shows really the Hebrew ideal of the blessing being on a soul level. It shows the importance and highlights the importance of this blessing. It's not just a prayer, hey, I hope your life's great, I'm going to miss you when I'm gone, the end. It's something deeper and more meaningful than that. It's on a soul level. So in the Amplified Bible, it says this, verse 4, same verse. He says, make me a savory and delicious dish of meat, the kind I love, and bring it to me to eat so that my soul may bless you as my firstborn son before I die. So again, the brothers here, Esau has been told to go and do this. Jacob and his mom are right outside the room here, and they hear what's going on. Jacob's like, okay, I already got the birthright. I already got the extra third of the estate. I want this blessing. So I'm going to trick my dad into thinking that I'm my brother and get the blessing from him. And that's what he does. It says Esau was a very hairy man. And so they have, the skins of these animals around their house from what they're going to make. So he puts it on his own skin because his dad's nearly blind. And he goes and pretends to be his brother Esau, and he steals the blessing. The father is tricked, and he thinks Jacob is Esau, and he gives Jacob, the younger, the blessing of the older. You would think, well, he got tricked once of his birthright. That's a big deal. It's 33% of the estate. The blessing's not a huge deal. Here's how big of a deal, here's how deep on a soul level this blessing was to these brothers. So when Esau is tricked by Jacob into his birthright, it's just kind of into the story. Oh, man, that's too bad. But when Jacob tricks Esau out of the blessing from the father, he hunts him down for 20 years to try to kill him. That's how deep the blessing was in this culture. That's how deep on a soul level blessing was from the father to the oldest son. So much so that, it's 33% of the estate. I'll let it slide, but the blessing is mine, and I'm going to have it, and I'll do anything I can to get it. So it's on a deep soul level. Remember, for us, blessing is not about our happiness and wholeness, but it's about flourishing for everyone else around us as well. That's true blessing. And that's what our soul needs. We are to bless others. And that's really what Esau didn't really see in this blessing. It was so personal to him that his brother had taken his blessing. It's mine. It belongs to me. It's for me. Not realizing really the effect that could have on generations after him. So we want to understand blessing in the proper way, that it's not about just my happiness, not just about my wholeness, but it's about the flourishing of those around me. I am blessed to be a blessing. So we'll look at for a few minutes here how we do that, how we can see blessing in that way, and how we can live blessing out in the way that's good for our soul and the souls of those around us. So this first idea seems very simple, but it is very essential that we understand this, that we bless others in word and deed. So it's not that we pronounce this blessing on others intentionally, but everything we do, everything we say to others has an effect on them in one way or another, positive or negative, uplifting or not, encouraging or not. This is a good reminder. Our words and actions affect others' soul health. And Proverbs 18:21 points us out by saying, the tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit. So what we say to others affects them. So this idea of sticks and stones breaking my bones and words will never hurt is complete garbage, right? And you know it is. We say it and it's cute and it's a nice defense mechanism, but when you have so many insults hurled at your way, you just have a breaking point. When you're torn down verbally so often and abused verbally so often, so many times, in so many ways, by so many people, you can't take it anymore. Words do matter. They have a profound effect. Proverbs says the power of life and death. So what we say and even how we say it matters. How we respond to others matters. How we react or overreact affects others. Even nonverbal communication matters. It speaks volumes. So your spouse can only take so many eye rolls before their soul is wounded. You think, oh, it doesn't matter. It matters. You know, your spouse can only take so many sighs of disappointment that you're a complete failure, you know. They can only take so many of those before it starts to wound their soul and fracture that relationship. What we say and how we say it matters, verbally or otherwise. Your friends that try to reach out for friendship can only take the cold shoulder so many times before it affects their soul health and that relationship as well. It says the power of life and death is in the tongue, which means when we're talking about blessing, the opposite of blessing is cursing. Now you would say, well, I don't curse. Well, you don't have to say those few words to really curse others' souls. Again, it's everything we say, everything we do matters. Jesus says this, so in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you, for this sums up the law and the prophets. There's this idea of, you know, we want to leave things better than we found them. It's that way with other souls. I want my impact on someone else's soul to uplift them. I want my influence on someone's life and their soul and their spirit and their psyche to be influenced in a positive way by me. Not that there's anything special about me, but that I want to have that kind of impact and influence on others. So I leave them better than I found them. We do that through word and deed. How we treat others matters. How we speak to each other matters. It's blessing or cursing. There's no third option. There's no middle ground. It's A or B, blessing or cursing. We do that in word and deed. Two other thoughts there as we move through this kind of quickly this morning is this. It's important to know that we bless others most when it costs us the most. We bless others most when it costs us most. We see this example in the Old Testament in a friendship of two men. One is named David, one is named Jonathan. Like they're your classic BFFs, but they shouldn't be. They should be your classic mortal enemies. Here's why. So Jonathan is the son of King Saul, the first king of Israel. He should be next in line to be king number 2. Yet his father's sins have God's cut him off from his kingdom and already anointed David as the next king. Somehow they become best friends. So David is a teenager. Jonathan's probably a teenager. They're about the same age. So David has just become a nationwide hero by defeating the giant Goliath in one-on-one combat. He's killed this tall, huge giant with a slingshot, killed him dead, cut off his head. Now he's like a national hero, front page of the paper, and he's now Saul's personal assistant. We see this here in 1 Samuel 18, verse 1. As soon as he had finished speaking to Saul, that's David. So David's just defeated Goliath, and they're kind of having a post-game chat, okay? As soon as he finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David. And Jonathan loved him as his own soul. And Saul took him, David, that day and would not let him return to his father's house. He hires him forever. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was on him and gave it to David and his armor and even his sword and his bow and his belt. Now, I don't know at this moment if Jonathan really knows who David really is at this point. They've just kind of met and immediately they're best friends. But it's not going to be long before David tells him, hey, John, guess what happened to me a couple months ago? The prophet of Israel anointed me as the next king of Israel. How cool is that? And Jonathan's going to be like, no, I'm the king's son, so I'm the next king. And you can imagine it's going to be kind of awkward for just a second. Like, not sure how this is going to work. But they're still inseparable friends. I think Jonathan's soul, Jonathan's spirit is underappreciated. He's kind of a footnote in David's life, but he should be like numero uno in this story because he had everything to lose by being friends with this man who's going to take his place, and yet he didn't let that stop him from having their souls knit together as friends. He was such a blessing to David through these formidable years, so much so that even though Jonathan knows he's taking the spot that should belong to me, I'm going to be his friend. Even when Jonathan's own dad, King Saul, tries to kill David on multiple occasions, Jonathan's got his bro Dave's back. There's one occasion where he knows Saul's got a plot to kill David. He helps David escape his own father. And then guess what happens? His own dad tries to kill him for this. It's treason. It's not right. He's taking your spot. Don't you understand? You shouldn't have his back. You should be the one to kill him. You should be my secret ninja spy that's going to take him out for me, and then you can have the spot that belongs to you. It's his fault. He's the problem. You should get rid of him. And Jonathan's like, no. So he's such a blessing to David because he doesn't let competition get the best of him. He doesn't let jealousy and envy and greed and selfishness keep him from being a blessing to David. I wonder if we can do the same thing. I wonder if we can really, truly be happy for a coworker that gets that raise that we thought we deserved. I wonder if we can truly appreciate when they get a promotion that we worked for and we feel we deserve. And nope, I'm going to be bitter and angry and mad. I'm going to talk bad about them. I'm not going to honor them. Even if they're my boss or my superior now, I'm not going to do it. Or will we be like Jonathan and truly be happy when others succeed, even if it costs us? Because that's when we bless others the most, is when it costs us the most. When we have the most to lose by being someone's friend or being loyal to someone. I have so much to lose, and I could gain so much more if I would just turn on them or try to trip them up, or just I would feel better about me if I wasn't so happy for them. That's really not true. We bless others most when it costs us the most. So even when we don't have that extra, but we see someone in need and we bless them, that's a huge blessing. I don't have a lot of time, but I'm going to invest it in someone. That's a huge blessing. We bless others most when it costs us the most, when it's sacrificial, when it's generous. We want to be like Jonathan in that way. We also bless others most like this. We bless others most when we bless those least like us. We bless others most when we bless those least like us. Jesus says in Matthew 5, verse 14, you are the light of the what? World. Like a city on a hilltop that cannot be hidden. He says this right at the conclusion of the Beatitudes in the Sermon on the Mount. So Jesus is saying this very intentionally, like he always does. He's talking about being blessed, being blessed, being blessed. And then he says, hey, guess what? The blessing is not for you. The blessing is not about you. You're a city on a hill. You're the light of the world. So we're not just to bless our family. We are to bless them, but not only them. It's not, again, not, hey, I'm going to keep all this to myself. It's not just about being a blessing even in this body, although we want to be a blessing in this body. That's not enough. We are to be a blessing to those outside of us who are least like us. And that's what the Good Samaritan story that Jesus tells us all about. So this Jewish man is, beaten on the road and left for dead by robbers, and two religious Jewish guys see him and don't help him. And then a Samaritan who should be the enemy in the story. Culturally, Samaritans and Jews are not friends. They have their own little section of the country that they're supposed to live in. Stay over in your corner. Stay in your lane. Stay away from us. You're not good enough. We don't accept you. We don't like you. Boo. But the Samaritan in the story is the one who helps the Jewish man on the road. So that's the whole point of the story. That's the thing that Jesus is getting in there. Hey, the bad guy is now the good guy in my story. He's the one that's doing what others should have done. And we bless others most when we act in that way. When we help those that are least like us. It's not enough just to bless those that bless you. We want to be a blessing even to those that curse us. So the model of Jesus is not an easy one to follow. The path of Jesus is not an easy one to follow. This is not easily done by design because we can't do it in our own power. We can't do it in our own strength. We don't want to do many of the things that Jesus requires that we do, and that's the point. I need the power of the Holy Spirit to help me to love those that don't love me back, because that's what I'm called to do. I need someone outside of myself to empower me to bless those that want to curse me. That's the whole point of this Christianity thing. And this really is the reason why I'm so excited about next Sunday, our 1C Serve. Because we're going to be serving people who aren't like us. And that's the point. Now, I've not met all the neighbors around here, some of them. And most of them I've met seem like very friendly, very nice people. They're awesome. But some of them are not Christians at all. Does that mean I don't bless them? Well, it's like, well, they're Christians, so I'll bless them, and they're not, so I'll forget them. No, that's not the point. We should bless probably more so those that are not of the faith. That makes more of an impact. That's true, real blessing. So we're going to reach people this coming weekend that don't believe like we believe, that don't vote like we vote, that don't see life the way that we see that, and that's the point. That's why we're here. That's why God opened up this facility for this church to be here at this point in time, because there are people around us that aren't like us that need us. There are people that don't think like us and don't believe like us that need us. Not so we can necessarily change the way they believe or think, but so maybe our actions will cause them to think, wow, you mean that church over there, they're a little bit different because they actually like me. They'll actually talk to me. They actually dropped a little gift bag by my door. They actually mowed my lawn because they just wanted to bless me. That's the point. You need your lawn mowed? Okay. Oh, it happened. Okay, I was like, hey, we need some volunteer. We need some yards that we need people to mow. So if you were there. Yeah, but Eddie and Raymond came in and helped you with your yard. That's what the church is all about, is helping each other. Even if we're not the same, even if we don't look the same or talk the same or have the same story, that's the point of the church. And it's really the only movement that does this really well. And sometimes we haven't done a great job of that. And so that's why we're trying to be like the first century church. We're trying to get rid of some of this other stigma and say, nope, we're just here for the community, for anyone and everyone that needs Jesus, whether they know him or not, we're here for them. Whether they believe like me or talk like me or think like me, it doesn't matter. I'm here to be a blessing. And we bless others most when we bless those least like us. That's the point. That's true blessing. So our soul is expressed through blessing. Our soul is freed through blessing. Because like Jonathan and David is the opposite of Jacob and Esau. Jacob and Esau had this tension forever and ever and ever. I'm going to kill you, and I'm going to hunt you down. I'm going to, and then it took 20 years of wasted time before they reconciled. But you have David and Jonathan. There was freedom for Jonathan's soul as he blessed David. And there's freedom for David's soul as he loves Jonathan. He's like, I could feel tense around him. I could feel unsure around him. But there's this freedom in our relationship because we're being a blessing to one another. There's freedom expressed through blessing. And then also there's blessing through blessing. Again, as I am blessed, it goes back out to bless others. And then guess what? God brings it back again somehow. I don't know how he does it. I don't know how he has enough supply, but he does. I don't know how he has enough energy and time, but he does. Every time that it just pours out of me, it comes back in some way. It's reciprocated in some way, in some form or fashion. God's blessing returns. He never fails. So don't feel like, well, if I just keep blessing and pouring out, I'm just not going to have enough. Not true. Or if I just keep giving, I'm not going to have enough. Not true. God's blessing never runs out. It never expires. It never goes bad. So as we bless, we find blessing. It's good for our soul. And it's what a happy soul needs. It's what a whole soul needs. It's what a healthy soul and a fulfilled soul needs, is this idea of blessing. Our soul needs it. Our soul craves it and yearns for it. And so as we give it, then we will receive it back. And that's what our soul desperately needs, is this idea of blessing. And I hope that we live that out in our lives and see the fruit and the benefit in our own souls.